The Drought. On our very first day, Christopher had mentioned that each safari found its own theme. Early on, he declared that our theme was babies, because baby animals had been sighted in abundance since the beginning. I, for my part, wasn't sure about this theme business. Throughout, there had been talk of the drought and how the climate had changed. Africa had not been quenched in November by the little rains, and it was obvious in Arusha and Lake Manyara as we climbed the mountains toward the crater. It was more obvious at the crater rim itself. The sign that greeted us at check-in had simply said, "We have run out of water." In my blindness at the time, all I could register was the way this would affect my personal comfort. When we descended into the crater, Bwana commented, as he had again and again, how dry it all was. In the crater was a spring-fed lake, but that one lake had to support all wildlife living there, for those animals did not migrate. Yet I still did not grasp how dire the water situation really was, and so that evening, as mentioned, I felt justified in running the water over me longer than I should have. I felt I deserved it after the inconveniences suffered the previous night. At Finch Hatton's, all the camp was green. The hippos were happy and wildlife abounded in camp from the springs that fed the river running through the property. It didn't even dawn on me until we had left there that most of the wildlife were near the camp because that was where the water was. Each game drive, we traveled miles to capture exotic animals in their natural habitats, and it should have told us that at Finch Hatton's, the wildlife was right inside our own camp, probably rejoicing each morning and afternoon when we all left camp to go find them. They play their own private game of hide-and-go-seek with us. When we return in the waning light, there they all are, the whole circle of life, right at our doorstep. We flew over the desolate landscape on the way to Larsen's, so hot and brittle. But it isn't until after the morning game drive, when Muffin has arranged for us to go on a nature walk, that my fog of ignorance begins to lift. Our guide on our walking tour around camp is a young girl who belongs to the Samburu tribe and who has been educated and hired for the purpose of giving guided tours. Her English isn't the best. We are also accompanied by one of the attendants of the camp, as well as a Samburu warrior, a man of few words, carrying what I imagine to be the gun that reverberated through camp yesterday that nobody will cop to. It is the warrior who points out the cheetah track to us. Once again we cross her path, and once again I long for the experience of viewing her in the wild. Will we see her today? I hesitate to tell you this because I know you will scold me, but I have had enough of real shoes and make the mistake of wearing flip-flops on our walk. I spend much of our walk with head bowed, looking about my feet for 4-inch thorns, various and sundry types of dung or snakes. As mentioned, Muffin loves the dung and busily asks questions that help the rest of us learn about this place of red dust. The day is too hot and dry for many creatures to be out, which is probably a blessing with us on foot. What few animals there are scamper out of our way. Animals tend to be shyer of pedestrian tourists than they are of the vehicles, which they have become used to. Our guide explains that people on foot usually are hunters, as the animals know well. People in vehicles pose no threat, only a mild annoyance. I think how similar this is to the behavior of the whales that visit Maui each year between December and April. The cattle boats that carry tourists into their private liquid home to watch them breach and flap their fins and blow mist into the air might as well strike them as just such an annoyance. It isn't until we leave the banks and go down to the riverbed itself that I feel Africa for the first time. When on safari, one does not walk around. The only walking I have done since my arrival has been in the camps, and I'm always so busy paying attention to the life around me that I haven't absorbed the vibrations of the land itself. When we step onto that hard-packed soil that has been underwater for years and now lies exposed to the sun, the story travels up through my legs and into my heart. For it is not dead. It is just very, very ancient, and its heart beats slowly. I figure the reason I hadn't felt these vibrations before, aside from the fact that I hadn't really been in contact with the earth, was that I was used to the vibrancy of Maui. In contrast, the story Africa tells is wise and subtle. There was no subtlety on Maui. Maui is still a child and at times babbles like a young adolescent waiting to blossom into puberty. She offers waterfalls and rainbows and lives in every shade of green imaginable. Haleakala crater watches over her and bears some wisdom. But even Haleakala's landscape, akin to the moon, could never compete with or lay claim to what Africa has endured. For wisdom is a learned thing. Maui has had few lessons. Africa could teach her. If only she were close enough to hear the whispers felt through my flip-flops.